The biggest problem I see with life insurance agents is that they sell at a really high level, they get really good at it, but then they get burnt out. And you will get burnt out because there's no way that you want to sustain a really high level of production for several years. So something that I want to talk about today that doesn't get talked about enough is how you could retire as a life insurance agent. And I don't mean necessarily retire where you never work again, but how you could eventually get to a point where you're making enough money residually or passively where you don't have to be on the phones, an insane amount of hours. We're going to go through a couple of the options, but the reason I decided to make this video is because I've always had the feeling that everybody gets told to do something by their uplines, typically what is something that's important to the upline or the necessities of that business. And I want you to hear directly from me what I personally think that you can do so you know all your options and you kind of figure out as you go along your journey which direction you want to take with your business. So you could do this for a very long time because this industry is beautiful, but you will get burnt out and then people end up quitting. I've seen way too many good people quit just because they didn't want to take it anymore. So let's jump right into it. So I took some notes here to make sure that I could stay on track with these things, but the first one, which is probably the one that you hear the most, is going to be recruiting. I think recruiting is pretty straightforward. You start building a team and eventually you make enough income off your team. Now, I want to make a whole separate video on how to build a team successfully and how to get to the level you want to get to as an agency owner. I say this from experience. I am in the process of onboarding over 1,500 Spanish agents right now, and we already have a few hundred agents on the English side. So all in all, probably well over 2,000 agents that I would have accounted for along with my partners to be able to recruit into our business. And the thing with recruiting is that it's a hit or miss. It's one of the things that you always have to keep going. You can never just stop. A lot of people say, I just want to have a team of 5-6 killers and together we'll go further. The numbers have to be in your favor in recruiting. So if you're somebody who likes to recruit, just know that it gets a lot harder before it gets easier, but it's definitely a way to, and probably the simplest way to get out of the field. And as long as you don't do it prematurely, right? Because I think the other mistake people make is they recruit to get off the field, which is really what you cannot afford to do. So recruiting, I think everybody knows about that, pretty straightforward. It is a valuable way to get out of selling and eventually get into a point where you're more managing the business, but it's hard. It's not as simple as people make it seem, and you have to have a lot of tools, resources, and things available for you to be able to do that. So you got to keep producing, and if you're not a good recruiter, then obviously that might not be an option for you. The next option I want to talk about is, let's say you keep your production up, right? You're a high producer, because this applies to people who are producing at a high level. How do you start cross-selling or transitioning into products that are heavy on the residual side, specifically on the health side? And I put here, just for the sake of the argument, ACA and or private health. Those are strong residual products that pay residual years after year. The difference between that and life is that life obviously pays you a big lump sum up front. So if you got into this business and you didn't have a lot of money, which a lot of people get into it, in that situation, you need to get your money up by selling life. But once you're making your money, then you need to start educating yourself on how to properly cross-sell. One of the things that makes my business really, really strong is that, yes, we do really well on the life side, and that's typically what you hear me talking about all the time. We have over 25,000 lives on ACA. We do over 26 million between my partner and now that we have a joint venture on supplemental. I personally accounted with my group for over 6 million of that supplemental business sold last year. And we have, dabbled into Medicare a little bit, which we'll get to here in a little bit, but we're really strong. And the way I did that was by understanding that I needed to be able to get into other lines of business if I wanted to build more on the residual side. So the formula is simple: sell and make enough money so you could pay to play on the health side. It's that simple. Yes, there is a lot more that goes into it, but if you don't have the money, it's going to be really, really tough for you to get into it. So sell a lot of life, make a lot of money, learn how to cross-sell and how to develop a book of business on the health side, whether that's ACA under 65 or private health for folks that make too much money. Next one will be Medicare. The thing with Medicare to me, so I'll start with, I guess, a disclaimer is I am a firm believer that if you want to do Medicare, you should do only Medicare. So this will be more of a transition. Now, you would only transition if you saved up enough money where you could afford to not live off your life money and the income you've gotten accustomed to by selling life at a high level. But if you make that transition, here's my thoughts on Medicare. Medicare is almost like the perfect middle ground between like ACA and life, or just traditional under 65 health and life, because it's the ACA side specifically, you don't really get advances as earned month to month per member per month. So if you factor in your cost per acquisition for you to build a sustainable book, you had to be bringing in cash, which is why I suggested you do it as you're selling live and you start cross-selling or finding ways to develop that book. Medicare on the flip side does pay you some money up front, not as much as life, but enough to at least try to cover your cost per acquisition. And it has as strong, if not stronger, residuals than your ACA client does. And if you sell it right, the retention's through the roof. So Medicare is a very valuable option. The catch there is that you would have to literally transition. I don't see a world where you could be a top producer in life and a top producer in Medicare. It's not an easy cross-sell. There's a lot of regulations and compliance things that go into selling Medicare. And it's one of those things that, in my opinion, you need to do full-time, but nonetheless, something that if you have enough money put aside, then you'll be able to just transition and build a sustainable book once you have enough income and money put aside that, you can go maybe a year or 2 years without, making the same income you've been making the last few years. All these are very valuable options to eventually stop selling life that people don't talk about, because again, your uplines probably want you to sell life. And listen, if you work with me, I want you to sell life, but but I'm very transparent from the beginning because I want you to be in this business for a very long time, not just for a few years. And then as an added bonus, something that is not insurance related, but obviously you can do, which a lot of you have the idea and the plans to do, is, make a lot of money and start investing it smartly, whether that's in stocks or something like real estate, coming up with assets that can cash flow at some point. And that's maybe a little bit of a longer game, but even then, if you're smart with your money, definitely do something, because at the end of the day, what we want you to do is to not have to bust your behind for, imagine if you're selling 50, 60, 80, 100,000 a month right now, you're probably working 40, 50, 60 hours a week. How long can you sustain that? Do you have a family? Do you want to spend time with your family? You're paying the price. You need to pay the price. The path of most resistance will get you there. But I also believe in working smart, not just hard. And these options that I laid out are for you to be able to stop eventually selling at the level that you're producing now. I guess honorable mention would be things like annuity or financial products. Those are just more high ticket items that maybe not so much on the residual side, but you don't have to work as hard. It's a niche that if you get into it, yes, it'll pay you a lot, technically working less, which it's an honorable mention, but not one of the ones that I included as my top 3 or 4 for you to get out of the field. So I hope that helped, guys. If you like this type of video, please like it and comment below, and we'll try to bring some more value to you guys.